This podcast is brought to you by Anchor Podcasts. Have you yourself ever wanted to be a podcaster? Well, Anchor makes it simple and easy for you to start today. Download their app on your iPhone or Android device and go through their step-by-step process from recording all the way through distribution. Visit their website, anchor.fm, or download the app on your Android or iPhone device today. That's Anchor Podcast. What's going on, everybody? Travis Fowler, Harkrider, back again this week with the Four Corner Podcast. So let's talk wrestling. This week, there was a lot of cool stuff that took place in wrestling. On the Raw side, we've got it confirmed that we've got Finn Balor versus Edge inside Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania, which a lot of people felt like that was coming, especially after it came out that they were originally wanting to do this at the Royal Rumble. We obviously saw that didn't take place, so now they've moved it to Mania, which I think is the much better option. While we stick with the Judgment Day situation, of course, Dominic and Rey Mysterio are still continuing their feud, which led from Raw into SmackDown, the announcement of Rey going into the Hall of Fame. And I actually agree with a sentiment that somebody said earlier today, which is I don't know if I would like them to continue the angle with Dominic crashing the Hall of Fame ceremony, but maybe like a stern walk away or something like that when he's inducted if they want to continue the feud and still work it into the Hall of Fame. Also on Raw, a somewhat questionable segment about Asuka and Bianca going into it this close to Mania, where we saw Asuka dance around with the championship a little bit, which was a little like, okay, I don't know if this necessarily goes with what's happening, but it is what it is. We also saw so much stuff leading up to the Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn situation on SmackDown, where KO walked away from Sami yet again. Cody's still trying to play peacemaker between the two of them. All good stuff that was going to lead more into that overall story with Cody, Sami, and Kevin Owens against the Bloodline. All good stuff going on there. Raw overall just wasn't terrible. There was a lot of good points with Raw that had continuation of stories. I think it's a much better show than what it was, but overall, SmackDown I still think is the far superior product. That was actually showcased even last night with the Bloodline showdown with Sami and Jay finally. But before we even got there, they had the match between Sheamus and Drew McIntyre, which I'm very happy ended on a DQ because I was hoping that was going to be the route they took, because the idea of a triple threat between Sheamus, Gunther, and Drew McIntyre just looked too good on paper to really pass up. So I'm glad that that's what we're ultimately getting at WrestleMania. It's what should have taken place to begin with. I know they wanted to extend the story an extra week, which wasn't terrible. The match was good, and I really do think the triple threat match actually has a chance to steal the show at Mania. LA Knight had a great showing with Cody also on Raw, which we didn't mention earlier, but that will lead into what plans they have for LA Knight, not just at Mania, but after. Chad Gable also had a continuation of his what looks to be split from Otis, who I think is going by Odyssey or something like that with Maximum Male Models now. He's kind of going in the continuation of a comedy act, which is good and bad. But overall, for Chad Gable, apparently it means good things also after Mania. So all positive things there. We'll get to him and LA Knight a little bit later. On NXT, we saw how the women's title is currently, I guess, being held up because Roxanne Perez is injured potentially, really, but not. It's a whole situation that some are speculating is just for story. I think it is that personally. Dave Meltzer speculates that there could be a different underlying issue, but of course, like a lot of Dave's reporting has been, it's been a lot of, well, there may be something. It could be touch and go, but it might not be this. It could actually be this, but it may not be. Like there's a whole lot of vagueness going on, which if you listen to Eric Bischoff and Bruce Pritchard's podcasts, apparently that's what he's done for the last 20 to 30 years. So it's nothing new in their book. Of course, it's not anything new that I'm used to hearing, but it seems more so lately than ever. He's been more vague with what they could or could not potentially be doing. Anyway, back to NXT. They had Braun Breaker and Carmelo Hayes do the contract signing for Stand and Deliver. Those are your two stalwarts for this version of NXT, which also I will talk about a little bit later, how NXT is getting a lot more hate than what it should. And if people still haven't been watching or tuning in, I believe they're really missing out on a solid product that is the new NXT, if you will. Over on the AEW side of things, the Blackpool Combat Club is continuing their, I guess, descent, if you want to call that, from being popular face roles to now being dastardly heels, which it's interesting, but it's a good interesting because all of the people involved in that faction are tough. They are tough gentlemen. And having them go from being beloved baby faces to disdainable heels is a great move on their part. They had a great six-man tag with the Dark Order. Also, they had a great international title match with Jeff Jarrett and Orange Cassidy, where Cassidy picked up the win and retained the title. By the way, Blackpool Combat Club did defeat the Dark Order. And also, shout out to Stu Grayson for his unbelievable performance and return to AEW. It got him a new AEW contract, so props to him for that. The main event of AEW was the Trios three-way match for the Trios tag titles, that being the Elite, Jericho Appreciation Society, made up of Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, and Daniel Garcia, and my favorites, the House of Black. And eventually that got to its finish where House of Black retained, but then the aftermath of the BCC coming out and just wanting to lay a beat down further onto anybody that was in their path. And that then led to Hangman Page coming back out, and he made the save for his Elite brethren. And they had a really cool moment at the end where Hangman was in the middle of the Elite being in the ring on one side and the BCC on the outside of the ring. So there's speculation that they're going to reunite Hangman with the Elite. It's been something that's kind of, I think, underlying, been in the works. It could be their version of doing long form stories, which is good on AEW's part because we know we don't get very many of those, as evident by the announced Dream match that we'll see this upcoming week. And I want to go ahead and just kind of lead into that with the AEW side of things, because there's been a realization on my part, in thanks to my lady who does me the great service of watching AEW every Wednesday. And I was kind of talking about it with her this morning. And they announced, if you haven't been made aware of already, that I'm going to butcher this completely. So I'm just going to shorten his name. That Vikingo is coming to the States and taking on Kenny Omega this upcoming Wednesday. And this came from a side of me that understands that I'm much more accustomed, I guess, to the WWE style of things, or if you even want to go to the Western style of wrestling, that's more heavily involved into the story aspect that builds up to the eventual match, as opposed to the only way I can call it is the New Japan style of just putting together a match for the sake of a match. And that's what I believe Vikingo and Omega is just, it's a quote unquote dream match, and there's no real story that goes into it. It's just we're announcing it and here it is. And originally I was a little turned off by that because, as somebody on Twitter pointed out, dream matches in his mind are like Roman versus Rock or Steve Austin versus Rock from back in the day, where you get this build to potentially a unbelievable match where you're anticipating and can't wait to see it, as opposed to it being announced on social media and now you have just a few days to wait to watch it. It's not a bad thing because AEW, since they've been in inception, has been tagged as the alternative product. And they do present more of themselves in that New Japan-esque style of putting on great matches, really, and stories don't mean as much. And it was thanks to my lady here at home that she pointed out to me that that's okay, because there are some fans that enjoy that aspect of wrestling, that type of wrestling, where you can just have a match for the sake of having it. You don't need to have a story built over time in order to appreciate it, especially when you've got good athletes that are in this sport. And it is a sport, and it does take a lot of athleticism to do what some of these men, especially Vikingo, can do. So while I had an issue to really think of it, it's not really an issue. It's just not what I am accustomed to. It's not what I prefer. I can appreciate a good match for the sake of it being a good match. But in the overall of my professional wrestling, I enjoy having a story built from A to B to C all the way through Z to where you have me fully invested, which is what the Bloodline storyline, for instance, has been doing. And by the way, WWE uploaded on their YouTube page the entire Bloodline story, and it's about a 2 hour long video. And when I tell you that I'm going to go in depth on this in a little bit, the Bloodline story is the best story that I think has ever been told in modern wrestling. But sticking with AEW, the one thing that I can't get past at this moment, I like the overall team of Ruby Soho, Saraya, and Toni Storm. What I don't like, and I know it's been around in wrestling forever, so it's not like this is anything new, but they are blatantly becoming a female version of an NWO knockoff. Because when you think about it, you've got three people, and not just three people, but arguably three people who made a big name for themselves through the WWE. So they are the WWE people. That's why they call themselves the Outcasts. But you've got them running around with spray paint now, spray painting people, which I know is also nothing new, but it was synonymous with the NWO going across WCW and tagging NWO or whoever their victims were that week in some form or fashion with spray paint. Sounds like what they're doing here. It's three people in particular. NWO started off with three particular people. And Outcasts sounds very close to Outsiders. And there's just too many parallels there. And I really think they're doing themselves a disservice by not coming up with something that's a little bit more original. Keep the Outcast name. That's fine. I think that's actually a really cool team stable name. But the comparisons to the Outsiders plus the overall NWO angle itself is what's really kind of turning me sideways towards the whole angle altogether. Because right now they are building it up as the Outcasts AEW Originals feud, and that could work, but I just think they need to go about it a little bit different in order for it to not be so blatant of an invasion-like angle. Now, the reason I wanted to segue into that is because I wanted to talk about the other big news that came out this week. At least in some people's mind, it's big news. I do think it's still very noteworthy. Is the Bella Twins have now officially parted ways with the WWE. And they have officially announced that they are going by their names of Garcia instead. So we now have Nikki and Brie Garcia, the Garcia Twins. And the way that they closed out the Outcast segment on Wednesday, it was 5 AEW originals standing up to these 3 Outcasts. And it's kind of coincidental that Saraya even was one of the people that gave them their props, as many people did, that are like, oh, you're now free from the WWE contract and you can do a little bit more things than what you could when you were under contract. Could it be possible that they would set up for the Garcia twins to show up in AEW to join the Outcast faction? Honestly, if you're going to go ahead and run with the story and the way that they're presenting it, I do believe you're going to need to have 2 more non-AEW original females to join the group in order for it to really make sense and solidify themselves as a threat to the AEW girls. They've still got plenty of time to tell that story because I'm sure this is going to pay off in some form or fashion at Double or Nothing. So I do believe, though, that you could throw the Garcia twins in the mix as being those other two pieces to the puzzle that would work in the AEW story that they're building with them. Now, back onto the WWE side of things, a big story that came out for them was the, I guess, absence is what we can call it, of Bray Wyatt over the last couple weeks. We saw the last of Lashley and Uncle Howdy in their interaction, where Lashley spine busted Uncle Howdy, and then after that, it's been silence since. Bobby Lashley hadn't been seen really on Raw over the last couple weeks. Wyatt hadn't been seen either. And apparently, the rumor was that he no-showed the Madison Square Garden event. I believe it was last weekend, I want to say, is where he was scheduled. And a lot of rumors and speculation were that there's been some creative differences and that Wyatt is walking out on the WWE because things aren't going the way he wanted. And over the week, a lot of that has been dispelled as rumors. And it was even reported they actually have a physical condition as to why Wyatt hasn't been seen recently. It has nothing to do with creative, which I actually believe that. With Triple H being in charge of creative now and him working so closely with Bray Wyatt like he did down in NXT, I tend to believe that this isn't a creative thing anymore and that it really could be some kind of physical situation. We know that there's been physical issues, more so though with body weight and whatnot back during the McMahon reign. Whether that's the same now or not, we don't know, nor is it any really of our business to know at this moment. Hopefully, though, Wyatt doesn't have any kind of severe condition that's keeping him sidelined, and hopefully we'll see him back on WWE TV here soon. But now that begs to question what happens with WrestleMania, because a lot of people had it pegged and it had been announced essentially, not officially, but it was pretty much in stone that Wyatt and Lashley was going to take place at WrestleMania. But if Wyatt can't go, what does that leave for Lashley? Does Lashley show up on the show and do like an open challenge that somebody comes out to, and maybe it's a surprise return, maybe it's a debut, maybe even Bray himself shows up at the pay-per-view as a surprise. I saw somebody on Twitter say, what if this was a way to bring the Fiend back? And what if this whole absence from TV kind of plays into the story? Because with Wyatt having multiple personalities, the Wyatt Six, as they've coined it, the Fiend could be one of those personalities. And even though Bray himself has said that that character is not coming back, it could be kayfabe character that he was doing as a way for it to still be a surprise when it eventually happens. All this is just pure speculation, though, and none of us will really know what'll go down until WrestleMania gets here in just a couple of weeks. But I am intrigued to see exactly what Lashley ends up doing. Is he left off the show altogether? I don't see that happening, but if so, maybe it is for the best. And if not, what are they going to do? It's an interesting situation that I hope turns out for the better in every way for everyone involved. But two people that have had things going their way for quite a while in WWE, to the point where it's being reported that both are in line for huge pushes after WrestleMania, and specifically for one, a huge interaction is set for WrestleMania for this person. LA Knight and Chad Gable have been putting in work since they've been given their respective roles. LA Knight, of course, was put back on our screens as the name that he is going by now after the whole Max Dupree thing was taken away and it was just given to Maxine Dupree, which was fine. That Maximum Male Model stuff was a dead in the water thing for LA Knight to begin with. So I'm glad that they gave him back that LA Knight gimmick. And he has knocked it out of the park ever since. He's got people reacting to him. He knows how to get heat. The guy's been a great worker for over a decade now, and it's good to see him getting this shine on WWE TV. He rightfully deserves it. He's a great character, and he's the one who's in line for some big things following WrestleMania, as well as something big taking place with him on the actual show. So I look forward to seeing what they do with LA Knight moving forward. Also, Chad Gable, as we said, you've seen it by his work in matches with Cody and so many others. he is a big time player. He still reminds me a lot of a younger Kurt Angle, which is also that more disappointing that he didn't end up getting the illegitimate son angle when Kurt Angle announced he had a child out of wedlock at the time. And Chad Gable should have been that son, but I digress. Seeing Chad Gable get his recognition that he has rightfully earned for his great character work over the last year, plus his in-ring work is stellar, and it honestly barely has any holes, if any at all. Chad Gable has just proven to be a reliable hand, and he has proven that he can be a great character. He even proved that down in NXT with his Ready, Willing, and Gable catchphrase for American Alpha. So I think this is way overdue, but I'm glad that it's happening. I'm glad that both him and Knight are getting a chance to show that they are big time WWE players. And I expect big things from both of them going forward this year in 2023. Speaking of 2023 and standouts, though, NXT has gotten a lot of hate since the 2.0 change. Some people, even after it went back to its gold variation, only gold and white mostly this time, they still think that it's a dull show. Now, maybe it's a dull show because there's not necessarily these big standout indie characters like we saw, and then maybe we were just also spoiled by the black and gold days that it's hard to see past that. But since the return to the gold and white of NXT as opposed to black and gold, and especially since that multicolor fiasco that took place for a while, it seems like NXT's finding its stride again. I said this on an episode a while back, and I still hold it to its truth that NXT is still a show worth watching. They've got a lot of great standout talent there. For the males, you've got the current champion Braun Breaker, who, whether you like his promo style, his in-ring work is very reminiscent that of his father, Rick Steiner, kind of combined with some Goldberg elements in there. And he's not a bad wrestler at all. Carmelo Hayes is showing how he has character and he has the physical attributes to be a big-time superstar, not just NXT, but for WWE overall. Of course, those are the two that are fighting for the NXT title at Stand and Deliver. Then you've got other people that are just pulling it out for the brand. Tony D'Angelo is a solid character. Dijak is slowly building his credibility through his character work and his in-ring work in NXT with this new run. I love that they gave him just his actual name of Dijak this time. Wes Lee, North American champion, doing great things. Axiom is there. JD McDonough, Ilya Dragunov is there. They've got great characters in the tag teams as well with the Creed brothers. You've got Indus Sher, who've got Jinder Mahal there now. Briggs and Jensen are a fun tag team as well, which their story with Kiana James and Fallon Henley has been awesome as well. There's a lot that NXT has that's showcasing the future talent. The women especially have been showing out. When you've got people like Roxanne Perez, Cora Jade, Tiffany Stratton, Sol Ruka, Zoe Stark, Gigi Dolan, JC Jane, I could probably go on how many great women are there building up the NXT women's division that once they especially hit the main roster, it could be a game changer for the entire WWE women's division because there's so much talent there that is still left to expose to the worldwide audience, not just to the segment audience that watches NXT now. But if you haven't given NXT a shot in a while, I truly encourage you to do so because it's well worth the time and the investment to see what they have done with the characters they have. Another character that I think is going to have a standout match at Stand and Deliver is Grayson Waller, paying off his feud with Johnny Gargano. It's all coming together very well for NXT, and expect bigger and brighter things moving forward in 2023 and beyond. But currently in WWE, there is only one story that has captivated people, and it's been a 3-year build. The Bloodline story is something that I actually watched the YouTube video I referenced earlier, and after watching it and seeing the whole story up till the point where we saw Jay explain why he kicked Sammy. I have to say that this is the best story that modern wrestling has ever seen and has ever been told. It's better than the Mega Powers exploding. It's better than the NWO Sting storyline, definitely because of the payoff. Really shot that horse in the face. Um, my favorite storyline had always been Undertaker versus Kane because it just went through so many different bumps and really was a story that lasted for decades. It's better than that. Bloodline has shown a very deep psychological story, and especially when it comes to the Jey Uso factor. Jey was the first person to really feel Roman's wrath. He was breaking Jey down, Roman was, psychologically and physically. By overpowering him physically, he knew he could eventually break him down mentally. Because while there might be the story of the family coming together, the real story within the bloodline is the psychological depths that Roman has gone to break his family down, to answer to his call and do his bidding whenever he sees fit. That's the true story throughout the bloodline. Watching the progression of Jey Uso coming into the family fold, finally falling in line after being abused by Roman time after time after time, to the point where now he doesn't question Roman, where Jimmy then came back and was questioning Roman, but then Roman manipulated him, and then he got the Usos fully on his side. Then you had the Sami Zayn factor where he used Sami for a while. He also introduced Solo Sikoa into the group. And then as we saw the breakdown start to unfold at the Rumble, where Zayn took the chair and hit Roman in the back, which they did a great job of referencing on SmackDown just last night, and stating that the only reason Jey is mad at Sami is because he's mad at himself for not being the one to do it first, which is a great way to plant the seed for what we know will eventually be Jey Uso turning on Roman. It's just more of a question of when, not if. And Cody fitting into this situation is perfect. And I understand where people really wanted Sami to be the one to do it. As I stated, though, Sami was always going to get to a route where it was going to be him and KO versus the Usos. Because ever since Sami got into the bloodline, as it was pointed out last night, Jey Uso was the one who didn't trust Sami from the get-go. Why? Because he's not blood at the end of the day. He doesn't care that he was willing to do whatever. He eventually broke down because the rest of the bloodline saw Sami and was broke down by Sami's charm. And Jey went against his first instinct. And he hates himself for doing so. But does he really hate himself because he went against his instinct? Or is there validity to what Sami said when he wishes he could have done to Roman what Sami did? And when Sami questioned him on that, Jay's face kind of turned away like he's calling me on some stuff. And it's all been great. But the why of why Cody fits best into this scenario is because Cody went from being the guy, as he's said numerous times, went from undesirable to undeniable. And when you look back, him and Roman's feud goes way further back than just the last few weeks. You can go all the way back to when the Shield was used as the Authority's henchmen for a while, and the whole Brother Rhodes story of Goldust and Cody against the Shield, where they had that amazing tag match for the championships at Battleground took place. They really feuded even back then. And then, of course, we saw how Cody's career in WWE went when he originally left. And he was, as he used to say, the star that left them in the dust. And he made himself known as a big player over the 6 years he was gone from the WWE, to the point where he is indeed what he says. He's undeniable as a character. He's undeniable as somebody that can lead the WWE brand moving forward. I've pegged him as the next John Cena. He's going to be the face of the company, and I still stand by that. And how you weave that into this story is Roman was always the WWE's choice. He was the guy that after the Shield, they wanted to hitch their wagon to and say, this is our next John Cena. This is our next Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, and whoever else you want to throw in there. But it didn't go the way they wanted, because while he was a polarizing figure, much to like John Cena getting boos and cheers, that's not really what you want for your baby face. You want him to be beloved by the entire crowd. And Roman just wasn't getting that. And they tried forcing that on us for 6 years themselves of Roman's our guy. Roman's the guy. You must like Roman. Cody never even once had that opportunity. So for him going away and coming back to now be put into that opportunity, he has a gripe and he has a reason to show that he was the one that was undeniable in this instance. But beforehand, he was WWE's undesirable, where Roman's always been the one that they desired to be the guy. So now you have that along with the Dusty factor that they brought up in their promo, which, like I said, I hope they don't continue that the next time they go face to face, which could be as soon as this Monday. I really do think that when you look at the overall puzzle pieces, Sami and Kevin Owens, Cody Rhodes, the entire bloodline, all the stories are culminating in this one angle that leads to WrestleMania. And it's nearly flawless. The way to make it flawless is by giving the ending that most people believe, and I too am part of that crowd, believes should happen. At the end of WrestleManias, both night 1 and 2, the Usos need to lose the titles to Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, and Roman Reigns needs to lose the title to Cody Rhodes. I saw earlier today someone was saying that Roman should beat Cody so that Cody has something to overcome and eventually get back to that main event spot. And I responded with, I think they run the risk, though, if they go that route of making it a Cena lull situation. And I don't want that at this point. But Roman at this point, part of their argument was you still have the Jey Uso story, the Seth Rollins story, because Rollins and him still basically do have unfinished business after the Rumble last year. And then, of course, the eventual Rock story that we all want to happen. With the exception of Seth Rollins, the other two people don't really need a match with a title on the line. The story's already built in there. Jey and Roman are cousins, and Jey was the first victim of Roman's tyrannical reign. Then you've got The Rock, who really comes back to show why Roman isn't the head of the table. Those are all family squabbles that, yes, make us intrigued, and they don't need a championship involved. So what I'm saying is, if they don't go the route of putting Cody as champion, then they really do run the overall risk of this dragging on too long, that being the title reign. I know they're close to hitting 1,000 days with him, but really that doesn't matter. Roman has done a great job carrying both championships, and WrestleMania needs to be the final stop on the Roman title reign. This is where Roman's reign needs to end, because all roads lead to Cody becoming the WWE Undisputed Universal Champion. Guys, that's all I got for this week. Let me know if you agree or even disagree with my thoughts about WrestleMania, the Bloodline story, how Cody fits in. Let me know if you feel the same or what you think should happen down in those comments below. Continue to like us and follow us on all our social media pages. Make sure you've subscribed to our YouTube channel so that you know when we upload a new video to the channel. My first interview with the unbreakable bad boy Justin Lee is now up, and we appreciate every single one of you that have followed us on any of our social media platforms and subscribed to the channel. Until next week, I will see you guys later and continue to love wrestling.